third graders. Welcome back to persuasive writing. And as you recall from the last video, that persuasive writing is a lot like opinion writing. Remember with opinion writing, you state how you really feel strongly about something when you support that with details. But with persuasive writing, it's a lot like that. But not only do you give your opinion, but you really want to change the listener's or the reader's mind, or you're making a call to action. You want your listener or reader to do something. So last time we met, I read a couple of stories about persuasive writing. And one of them was Dear Mr. Blueberry. And remember, Emily was trying to convince her teacher that there was a whale in the backyard. And she really was making a call to action. She wanted her teacher to help her to try to figure out how to take care of the whale. So that was Mr. Blueberry. I also read to you about the day the crayons quit. And remember, they were trying to persuade their user, the child Duncan who owned the crayons, to use them in a different way. Well, today I have a couple of more stories for you, and one of them is about Grace, who wants to be president. We're going to read about that one today. And also, I want a new room. And I think you can tell by the title that this child is probably going to try to persuade their parents to get a new room. So first, let's read about Grace. Grace for president. Again, in the title, it kind of tells you, or it gives me a clue as to what this story might be about. It sounds like this little girl, Grace, I'm going to assume that's her picture, she wants to be the president. Do you really think she wants to be president of the United States right now? Maybe she's a little bit young. Let's find out. These are just things I'm thinking as I look at the title. Here we go. One Monday morning in September, Mrs. Barrington rolled out a big poster with all the president's pictures on it. Grace Campbell could not believe her eyes. Where are the girls? Good point. If you look at all the president's pictures here, you can see there are no females. That's a very good question, said Mrs. Barrington. The truth is, our country has never had a woman president. Oh, no girl president ever? Grace asked. No, I'm afraid not, said Mrs. Barrington. Grace sat at her desk and stewed. No girls? Who'd ever heard of such a crazy thing? Finally, she raised her hand. Yes, Grace. I've been thinking it over, and I'd like to be president. Several students in the class laughed. Not very polite. Well, I think that's a star-spangled idea, Grace, said Mrs. Barrington. In fact, we can have our own election right here at Woodrow Wilson Elementary. Aha! So Grace isn't saying being president of the United States. She's talking about being president of her elementary school. The snickering in the room stopped, and Grace smiled. Would anyone else like to run for president? Mrs. Barrington asked the class. Nobody raised their hand. Becoming president was going to be easy, Grace thought. It's her first thought. It's going to be very easy. Let's find out. The next day, Mrs. Barrington made an announcement. In the name of democracy, fairness, I have invited Mr. Waller's class to join our election. Their class has nominated Thomas Cobb to be their presidential candidate. Grace's heart sank. Thomas was the school's spelling bee champion. His experiments always took a blue ribbon at the science fair, and he was captain of the soccer team. Becoming president wasn't going to be easy after all, Grace thought. Did she give up? I bet she perseveres. The teachers put the names of all 50 states and the District of Columbia into a hat. Everyone except Grace and Thomas got to choose a state. I'm Texas, said Anthony. I'm New Hampshire, said Rose. I'm Michigan, said Robbie. What does the number 16 mean? Each state is assigned a number of electoral votes. The number is determined by how many people live in that state, said Mrs. Barrington. Each of you will be represented for your state. Altogether, the country has 538 electoral votes. Interesting. Mr. Waller explained, on election day, the candidate who receives 270 electoral votes or more wins the election. Why 270? Asked Rose. That's more than half of the electoral votes, Mr. Waller said. Ah, becoming president really wasn't going to be easy, Grace thought. Do you think she gave up? Oh, no. She's tough. Grace came up with a campaign slogan. Make history! Vote Grace Campbell for president! Thomas came up with his own campaign slogan. Vote for Thomas Cobb, the best man for the job. Grace listened to what the issues were important to the students, and she made a list of campaign promises. So see, to persuade children to vote for her, she became a very good listener. Let's see, a peaceful school is no bullies, a cleaner school, no littering, better hot lunches, no more fish stick tacos. Thomas made up his own list of promises. Free tutoring, free soccer lessons, fish stick tacos every week. Grace made campaign posters and buttons. Thomas made posters and buttons too. They really want to persuade the children in the school to vote for them. Each week, the teacher set aside time for the candidates to meet with their constituents, which means all the children in the school. Polls were taken. Voters were making their choices. Grace is talking, really listening to their needs. Thomas is talking. Grace continued to campaign. At recess, she gave speeches. During lunchtime, she handed out cupcakes. After school, she held rallies. She talked to children, listened to their concerns. Meanwhile, Thomas wasn't worried. He had cleverly calculated that the boys held slightly more votes than the girls. So Thomas is thinking, all the boys will vote for me. At recess, he just studied his spelling words. And during lunch, he worked on his science experiment. And after school, he just played soccer, his normal thing. But Grace, even before the election, Grace made good on her promises. She joined the safety squad. She organized a school beautification committee, and she volunteered her time in the school cafeteria. Wow, she must be very tired. She's working very hard. She's trying to persuade people she'd be the best candidate. In early November, Woodrow Wilson Elementary hosted a special Election Day assembly. Grace and Thomas took their places on stage as the school band began to play. Henry was the first representative to approach the microphone. The Yellow Hammer State of Alabama casts its 9 electoral votes for Thomas Cobb. Fletcher said, the Last Frontier State of Alaska casts its 3 electoral votes for the best man for the job, Thomas Cobb. And then Hannah called out, the Grand Canyon State of Arizona casts its 11 votes for Grace Campbell. And so it went. State after state after state, they cast their votes. The scoreboard in the gymnasium kept track of all the totals, adding them all up. The voting demonstration was quickly coming to an end. Clara approached the podium. The Badger State of Wisconsin casts its 10 votes for my best friend, Grace Campbell. Grace looked at the scoreboard. Thomas had 268 electoral votes. She had 267. There was only one state still unaccounted for. Wyoming. And it's a little boy. I wonder what's going to happen. Thomas grinned. Grace felt sick. Sam walked up to the microphone. He looked at Thomas. He looked at Grace. He looked down at Grace's handmade flag. Sam didn't say a word. What are you waiting for? Thomas whispered. The band stopped playing. All eyes were on Wyoming. Finally, Sam cleared his throat. The Equality State of Wyoming casts its 3 electoral votes for dun, 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 Grace Campbell. The gymnasium erupted in loud cheers and a few boos. very bad manners. Very bad manners. Mrs. Barrington approached the podium with 270 electoral votes. The winner is Grace Campbell. Thomas looked stunned. Grace hugged Sam. Why did you do it? She asked. Sam handed Grace's flag because, he said, I thought you were the best person for the job. So she wasn't voted for because, they didn't vote for the boy just because he was a boy. They really, really thought about who's the best person. And Grace persuaded them that she was the best person. Sounds like she worked the hardest too. The following week, the students in Mrs. Barrington's class were preparing for their career day presentations. Grace volunteered to go first. She stood at the front of the room and glanced at the poster still hanging on the wall. My name is Grace Campbell. When I grow up, I'm going to be the President of the United States. This time, everyone believed she would. Oh, what a wonderful story. I really, really like that story. Okay, boys and girls, I'm actually going to read this one in the next video, so stay tuned. Bum, bum, bum. But as I'm reading these books, I'm going to stop and keep talking to you and reminding you about writing good persuasion pieces. In the book Mr. Blueberry, the little child Emily gave a lot of details as to why she really felt there was a whale in her backyard. She didn't just write, there's a whale in my backyard, what do I feed it? She described the whale. She was convinced. She gave details and reasons why she felt it was a real whale in her backyard. So when you want to convince or persuade someone to do something, you have to have some good, solid reasons behind it. Grace had to work really, really hard to persuade people to vote for her. She had to write posters, and she had rallies and speeches, and she really, really wanted their votes. So she had to convince them that she was the best person. And remember, when we're talking about persuasive writing, we are trying to get their reader and listener to change their mind or take action. When you change someone's mind, an example of that would be maybe a letter to your parents saying, oh gosh, Mom and Dad, we really need a family pet and here's why. Or I'd really like to stay up 15 minutes later and here's why. For money, you see this a lot in commercials, people trying to persuade you or your mom and dad to do something or to buy something. And examples would be maybe a commercial for food. Please come on down and eat our delicious burgers or eat our wonderful chicken and our ice cold soda. They really want you to buy their product. So you see a lot of persuasive type commercials on TV too. They really want you to do something or buy something. A support cause. You see this everywhere right now when your parents go out to stores or when they go get essential items. You see posters everywhere saying, please wash your hands, stay healthy, please stay 6 feet apart. I was thinking it would be great if kids could make posters about this, how to wash your hands and why we should wash our hands, or how to stay 6 feet apart and why that's important. So when you see posters like that outside of grocery stores, they're trying to persuade you to take care of themselves. They're supporting a cause of keeping people healthy. So I'm going to save the I Want a New Room book for next time, but I appreciate you tuning in and listening to some wonderful persuasive writing mentor texts. Thank you, boys and girls.